The Seahawks signed defensive tackle Dre'Mont Jones in a move that completely goes against all of the stuff that John Schneider usually does when it comes to free agency. Jones is the largest free agent signing since Seattle signed wide receiver Sidney Rice, remember him, in 2011. Seattle paid, well, they haven't paid, but they signed Jones to a 3-year, $51.5 million contract. This deal will pay Jones $23.5 million in year one and $35.02 million over the first 2 years of his contract. It's a massive, massive deal. It was a big shock because certain guys had signed elsewhere, certain guys had moved on, certain guys looked like they were being cut. We wondered if it would be more of the same from Seattle, but this looks like a completely different strategy. And yeah, Griff, what was your immediate reaction?
My immediate reaction was glee, joy, excitement. I remember watching him at OSU 4 years ago now, and really liking him as a player, thinking he was probably like a second round pick with upside. Sure enough, with Denver, he's seemingly gotten better every year. He's put on about 10, 15 pounds, like 285 right now. I think he played at like 270. I think he weighed in at 270 at the combine. That might be wrong though. That can be fact checked easily. Nevertheless, though, I remember watching him at OSU and thinking, he's a speed finesse interior rusher. If he just could gain 10, 15 pounds and not lose any speed, he could really, reach his potential. And sure enough, that seems to be what's happened. He seems about as fast as he was at OSU, and his play strength has increased. It helps him against the run, and also helps him power guards. So that was something he couldn't do as much of at OSU. So he can kind of put together a full rush plan. So, and in keeping tabs with him throughout his career, like just here and there, like limited exposure when the Broncos are on TV, watch an occasional game, he'd show up, and also like the clips that circulate on Twitter, he'd show up like, oh, cool, looks like he's being what he could be. That's awesome, good for him. And then this past year, with him being due for a contract, those players get thrusted into the kind of conversation more often, and the general conclusion was that he's a high-end player. And so sure enough, that fit my preconceived notion of him as well as my limited exposure. So I was happy about the move. And also it signals that they are trying to really improve the defensive line, like get that star player. Like they have a lot of, in my opinion, quality floor players, guys that get you 500 snaps, but they're not intended to be Pro Bowlers. They're not paid like they're intended to be Pro Bowlers. They're guys that every team plays hundreds of snaps with, right? You need those guys, but if you could airdrop in on top of those calibers of player that they always end up finding, a guy like Dre'Mont Jones or a high-end player, then your D-line can really, go from average at best to something better than that in both phases, run and pass. So to me, the idea was, hey, they're finally getting that pass rusher. So I was pretty excited. I went back and started watching his tape, and I guess long story short is I'm pretty underwhelmed. Now I know it's the idea that, and that's just my honest opinion of it. And like I went in primed for wanting to like what I'm seeing, because remember, like I liked this guy before I started watching more in depth. But he's definitely a good pass rusher, but I don't think he's the caliber of player that you're normally seeing getting these contracts. Now the contract is, 3 years, 51 million, but the way it's structured, it really feels more like 2 years, 28 million. So I think they view him more as like a $14 million per year kind of player. And that honestly is closer to what his tape shows me.
Yeah, he gets $30 million guaranteed and $10 million for the first year cap hit.
Right. And then they can save 16.5 million in his third season. So it definitely looks like they either plan to cut him or restructure in that third year. They're not going to let him play out the year at that number. So they're kind of, I think it's really well structured, because if they get what they have paid for, they'll extend him. If they haven't, there isn't a lot of risk with that third year. They can get out of it pretty easily. And we'll break down what we're seeing from him. I've only seen now 4.5 games of his 2022. So against Seattle, I mean, he's cooking as a pass rusher. Like that is his best ball. Like you want to see as much of that as possible. Against Houston, he was pretty much shut down by their guards. Against Jacksonville, I thought he was shut down with the exception of one play. He had a really good bull rush. Against the Raiders, he has a quality game, like a quality game. He's not crazy or anything, but he's doing things against the run that will really break down. But then as a pass rusher, some decent bull rushes, some kind of slow mounting corner moves. Like they're not crazy early in the snap wins, but like if the quarterback had to hold the ball for a little bit, it probably would result in a quarterback hit or maybe a sack. So with all that said, like I need to keep watching. Hopefully I see more games like the Seahawks game where he gave their guards trouble. But so I'm kind of cooled a little bit in terms of my excitement. But as a run defender, there are a lot of qualifications there, but he is a little bit better against the run in certain contexts that I thought he would be. Anyway, what was your initial reaction, Matty?
Yeah, similar as though, it's not necessarily massively dominant, but I think what stands out to me is more that he's able to add disruption to plays, not just in the clear passing downs, but like from a variety of different positions at different times. Sometimes you wouldn't expect it to happen, and it does happen. So like head up on a tackle is a four technique. Some of his best stuff happens in against the run, where he's able to quick swim into the backfield and blow up the play. And his tackle for loss numbers kind of reflect that as well. Like the fact that he's able to take his shots. And Pete Carroll spoke about kind of being stuck in the same mode up front and how they kind of need to change things and get guys who can split doubles and get guys who can get into the backfield and penetrate. Now, I don't think Jones is a double team splitter necessarily, but I do
Mm-hmm.
think he's someone who can take his shots and penetrate into the backfield and cause kind of a disruption rather than just sort of staying and playing the block or trying to anchor down. I think he kind of fits the different mode that they want. And if you look at his numbers, metrics wise, he had in 2020 an 8.3% pressure percentage per PFF, a 7.5% pressure percentage per SIS. 21, that's 9.5% or 8.9%. And then 22, 10% or 8.6%. Tackle for loss numbers, 9 tackles for loss in 2020, 11 tackles for loss in 2021, 13 tackles for loss in 2022, and then 6.5 sacks in 2020, 5.5 sacks in 2021, 6.5 sacks in 2022. So he has been like consistently productive. That's not like the craziest numbers. Like that's not like the tier one or even the tier two, right? But it is across the board, across those 3 years, but also run and pass causing disruption. And you, Griffin, also you found it was interesting how it's not like his pressure percentage is all coming on third and long. Like it's spread across the board in a nice way where first down, second down, third down, he's able to get that. And I think that shows again the point that he is able to, contribute his skill set on all downs. And so for Seattle, like, and just looking at the way he plays and how he fits in Seattle, I think he is more of a three tech, but also like a four eye four tech guy. You want him to be his one on one as much as possible. You don't want him to have to play combination blocks or double teams. He's not that type of player. But when his uh, quickness can win and his hand usage, that's where he's very, very good. He's not as quick as you might think from like the highlights, but he's very good at timing the snap up. And there is some quickness there. It's just not like elite.
Yeah.
And that I don't I tweeted when it happened that he's comfortable with the mirror stepping techniques that caused issues across the line. Like I don't necessarily think that's right anymore. Like having watched
Well,
more of him, like he can do it, but it's more that he's able to from those positions penetrate. And when he's one on one, he's comfortable with it. It's just when
right.
say a tight end comes to combo him, or say he's playing the 2-eye or heavy three tech and he gets comboed on say like duo or something. That's where some issues happen. So like he's an interesting sort of player because in terms of the scheme, like if they're schematically going to run 2-4 over G fronts at the same rate that they did last year in all manner of situations, it'll be a disaster because he can't play as a defensive tackle in a forefront with two wide nine edges, like reliably in all situations. What he can do is work in odd fronts like bare, tight, whatever, as long as that, because that keeps him one on one and he can play aggressive, so power step, but also like he can be in certain situations, depending what set you get, what flank. He can be, on a tackle or even maybe on a tight end and be one on one still and penetrate and get upfield. So I really like that situation for him. So to me, it kind of implies that like maybe Jones is the return of the big end to the defense. Maybe that's sort of over analyzing the move, but ultimately usage wise, he has to be playing in more bare and odd fronts. You can't, and so they have to offset their high usage of the 2-4 over G nickel front with more odd fronts. That could be nickel bare
Yeah.
fronts like a Penny or what they used to call Falcon, but like he has to be one on one as a 3 tech or a 4-eye, and that's where his best reps will happen and where he can cause issues and be disruptive, run and pass. And I think for me, like he's not. I mean, obviously the numbers go up each time. It's interesting you think of it as a 2-year deal, and I think that's correct. I think that's the right read of the situation. And you think about, when they signed Michael Bennett, Cliff Averill, that's obviously an easy thing to go to because it's so successful. But those at the time were 2-year deals of ascending players where they took a shot and it panned out really well, right? And this
Yeah.
is the same kind of thing where I think Dre'Mont Jones across the league is viewed as an ascending player. I think he, in terms of his production, is kind of been level for the past 3 years in terms of the metrics. But like, this could be something where if it pans out, then they hit massive. If it doesn't pan out, you sort of got a reliable baseline floor, and it's only a
Absolutely. Yeah.
2-year deal. So it's not that we're not excited about it. I just adding some analysis, some thought on, it's very exciting that it was such a big deal,
Right.
especially for the Seahawks. Um, it's an interesting change up to how they have in the past approached the position. I think Jones, if he hits, could really hit.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I mean, he is absolutely a useful player. He's a high floor player. To give a little bit more context to like his pressure numbers. So like ESPN pass rush win rate tracking, which is not subjective at all in that they have a very strict definition and it's all based on like GPS chip tracking. So it's hard to determine whether or not that's accurate, but it does tend to correlate. The guys that rank highly in it do tend to correlate with guys that we generally think are good, with the occasional like head scratching figure that's way up there or something. So Draymond, he ranks like, what was it, 8th or 9th in that figure. That's pretty good. And then in PFF's, they have, it's technically not pressure rate, it's pass rush productivity, where they weigh sacks and hits slightly higher, but for all intents and purposes it is. So his overall PRP was ranked 11th and then 13th in win percentage. So that tends to correlate with that tends to match up with ESPN's win rate, right? But then his PFF grade out of 73 players is ranked 36th as his pass rush grade. Now everyone that's listening to this knows how we feel about using pass rush grades indiscriminately in general. But then if you go to his pass rush or his PRP or his pass rush productivity against true pass sets, he's 21st, and then his win percentage is 24th out of 73. So he's still like in the top third, but it's more like at the bottom of that top third, like in true like pass rush situations. And I think that explains the discrepancy between his overall win rate and PRP and how PFF is viewing his play overall. That suggests that a good deal of his Production is kind of like unblocked or maybe play action where it can be kind of funky and stuff. Now there is an art to getting pressure against play action. Don't
And
get me
yeah, and
wrong.
I think he has that
He,
art,
and
you know,
he
and
did at
and
OSU. Like,
right, and I think that is a big factor as well. Like Seattle's play action pass rush has been difficulties for a while, and they need someone who can, again, I keep using the word, but disrupt from, you know, the kind of tougher or less typical spots.
right, right. And like you said, like he was used everywhere, right? Like a lot of the stuff, like the defense needed him to do that, but like for his sake, you could almost argue he was being sacrificed. Like there weren't a lot of opportunities to get pressure. So in picking out what Denver did, because Denver had a good scheme, but they did what they needed to do. Picking out how we think how Seattle needs to tweak things. I think that Seattle can actually provide for him more opportunities to get more clean one-on-one looks. Like, because what does bear defense do? A bear front, it gives you five guys, and your ends are B gap players. They're effectively three techniques. They're not like the classic two gapping 3-4 ends of your really. Now he'll have to do some 4-eye and 4 technique stuff where he'll have to 2 gap, and we'll look at that. But the meat and potatoes is, and they're the Seahawks 3-4, the 3-4 that they, when they do run it, the one that they ran with Ken Norton Jr. and the one that they switched to after the first 4 weeks this past season, first 4 or 5 weeks, they have their ends 1 gap, not 2 gap. I think also because there's 5 guys on the line of scrimmage, you're more likely to get a one-on-one with your guard when it's a pass set. So I think they can provide him more one-on-one opportunities, more opportunities to get upfield with a staggered stance, first step being explosively minded, and he can kind of show off what his skill set is, and I could actually see his pressure rate climb. Now, because he can do other things, like you said, Matty, when you were talking about like a return to like, you know, the classic big end usage, the way that they've used them with Red Bryant and Michael Bennett. This past year, we did see them like their check toward like tight end wing sets, like 2 tight ends to one side and everything, was to play an underfront. And so he absolutely fits playing the 5 technique in an underfront when you need to check to that. So
And they've been doing that for a while. So
right, right, and it's totally like it's not foreign to them at all. So he fits that. He does give them that flexibility. Um, that said, I think there's at the same time, I think there's merit to having him opposite the tight end, have him be the weak end so that he's always assured the one-on-one for pass rush purposes, and maybe try to go find a bigger body, because then you might be worried about those double teams that we talked about coming from the tight end on a down block if it's a gap scheme run. So there are just a lot of factors here. I think the best the take home should be that he's versatile. He gives them flexibility, and under the premise that they tweak the scheme as necessary, or basically do what they did in the middle month of the season, which is what they did in 2020 and 2021 in base and nickel. I think he can be really productive, and he can be that player that they want him to be, and he can live up to the contract. But it's dependent on that. If they keep the identical scheme with the identical front usage and the identical personnel packages and all those contexts, the run defense will be even worse. If people thought Puna Ford couldn't play the heavy 2-eye or the heavy 3, Dre'Mont in that context specifically is even worse than Puna as a run defender in that context. So, like, if we're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges, if they keep everything the same, the run defense will get even worse. So, provided that they go back to the scheme they should, there can be huge dividends here, but it's all on the premise that they play the scheme that they need to. So, I don't know. Beyond that, I don't have any other like Draymond thoughts. So,
well, on the tackles for loss thing as well, just to add a more advanced statistic to that, Next Gen Stats had Jones recording a 4.5% run stuff rate last season, which was 10th highest among defensive tackles. I've tried looking up what run stuff rate means. I can't find their definition, but I imagine that's similar to getting in the backfield. um, so also, it sounds like Seattle pushed heavily for Jones, and he told Josina Anderson of CBS Sports, I feel like Seattle has the biggest belief in me. They have a really promising team. I'm looking forward to transitioning to that city. So clearly a big fan of that. I should also say that in Denver, it seemed to end badly. Now, I actually watched the play he got hurt on, and that looked like a nasty, jarred, horrid play where he gets blocked in the back after winning against the center. But it did end badly, and I think there are signs that motor wise didn't look like he was fully going out for it on certain plays. Griff, you kind of saw similar things to that, right?
Yeah, he definitely seemed checked out. Like for like a month stretch. I know I said I only watched so many games, but watching that Jags game, he did not seem. He wasn't like his usual self in his
Mm.
body language. Not to infer too much because it's hard to know what's going on in the mind of someone. He didn't seem like he was happy to be there. Combined with his tweets and stuff, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if what I'm seeing on tape, where it seems like he's not what I thought he was, is really because he doesn't have his heart in it. And, it makes me want to go back and watch his 2021 stuff. Maybe that's really the true Draymond. And if, he's coming to Seattle and it's all hunky dory, he might be even better. So, yeah,
Yeah,
I do think that was a variable though.
yeah, no doubt. And then as a pass rusher, it's worth mentioning that his style is very much of uh, quickness, hands, and then ripping through. Like he's 6'2", he has to rip through guys because he's shorter than most offensive linemen. He looks to get hands on and then rip through and wins wide most of the time on guards. If he's going to get activate power, he really needs to be kind of stunted into it or line up wide and then bull
Mm-hmm.
rush. Like is he's not a power guy. You describe him as a finesse guy, Griff. So I think it's worth. What does that mean, Griff?
It's the foundation. So by finesse, it means like when he's a three technique lined up on the outside shoulder of a guard, his first step is upfield, pressing the outside shoulder or outside hip, foot, what have you, of the guard. So that's what he's doing first. He's trying to see if he can gain depth on the guard upfield on the outside. And then from there, if he gets position, he's looking to use really technique, like to defeat their hands, to clear their outside shoulders so that he can rip past them or swim over them to then work his way back to the quarterback. Now, again, finesse, rush plans. So if they overset or they defeat him, he has answers. Like I'm watching a play right now against the Chargers. He does the same thing. The guard jump sets him, and he quickly clubs or really slaps the inside arm and then swims over and he gets in and he forces Herbert to check it down pretty quickly. So like he knows what he's doing. He knows how to rush the passer. Like that's his calling card. Like he's a technique guy. Um, but like power comes second. So his power works better when his speed is stressed. And that was his problem at OSU. He would have the same rush plan, but when it would be time to convert the power, he didn't have the body for it all the time. Um, sure enough, like every once in a while he can hit, like he has some devastating bull rushes. They just don't happen that frequently. But he's got some of it though. So that's it's enough for his theory to work. Um, so and it's it maximizes him. So
This is a real example of sort of his stock winning to the point that Griff was making and about him being finesse and what I was saying. So this is second 11 early in the Baltimore game, and you can see here he is lined up as the left three technique. Got this wide angle on the guard. He knows that this is pass. One is shotgun. Two, the running back. Is that even a running back? 17 on the Ravens. It might be
I
a
don't
running
know.
back. This is the
It looks
problem
like
with
a
the
receiver
numbers.
though.
Anyway, the split is telling him everything's telling him pass. This tackle even. So this is sort of the foundation to how he wins.
Yep.
And this is stuff that we should say like Shelby Harris showed a bits of stuff like this, right? Like
I mean, Shelby, yeah, Shelby's just past his prime, but like this was Shelby's game too. I mean, Shelby Harris is one of the most productive three techniques in the league for a good 4 or 5 years. Um, and he provided a little bit of this. But obviously the idea is that Draymond's way younger and
Yeah,
he's going to give you more of it.
and the age is big. Like he's 26 years old.
Right.
So if he does
Right.
keep ascending, and again, that's why it reminds me kind of the Bennett Averill stuff.
Right.
And when was
Yeah.
the last time Seattle had a guy who would win wide at three tech with finesse? I don't remember. It's been a minute.
Um, Probably Jaron Reed 2018
Yeah.
for that one season.
Yep. So that is exciting as well. Right.
At least of guys that could also play early downs. Yeah, it'd be.
There you go. And as I need to get up some more of the film, but I think that it's been posited that maybe there is potential for this, meaning that Jalen Carter is not the pick for Seattle. I don't buy into that. Like, I think immediately, okay, this guy's an interior disruptor. Jalen Carter's an interior disruptor. Seattle no longer has a need at the position. But like, Carter's more of a defensive tackle, like in terms of you could play him in that 2-eye, you can play him in the 3 tech. You will find
You
thinking
could
about him
play
against
him at
combo
zero
blocks.
technique, even. Yeah.
Yeah, he could
He
play
can
like
do anything and everything.
legitimately across the line. Now, Dre'Mont Jones can play across the line, but not necessarily in all situations, and not as a 1 tech or 0 tech nose tackle. And you worry about him on combos. But Carter's much more of a defensive tackle. Jones much more of like a 3-4 end, or like a what the 5 tech or big end was called in Seattle's old 4-3 defense. So it doesn't really. It's more a pick that it ensures that they have depth in that kind of 3-4 end area. The draft is actually quite deep in, and it's quite funny as well. Like we mentioned, well, you mentioned on your Twitter, Griff, how that 2019 draft, it was full of kind of big end 5 tech candidates. You had Rashawn Gary, you had Dre'Mont Jones, you had Charles Omenihu, you had Zach Allen, who also got paid, and we'll talk about him in relation to the Seahawks.
Hmm.
And then the guys who went before all of them, LJ Collier, remember him, and Jerry Tillery, the first two taken in that draft, they didn't pan out, but all the other ones did. So
Yeah.
that's fun.
I mean, someone corrected me. Gary was taken before those, but then he is not a big end anymore. He's an outside linebacker, more of an
Oh
edge.
yeah, yeah.
So,
That's yeah.
so
What are you talking about? Yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
so in that, is it a classic John Schneider overcorrection? No, probably not, but they would have felt burned in that draft. And I think the way that they're approaching this, so Quinton Jefferson was released today. Adam Schefter reported Seattle saved basically $4.5 million doing that move. Poona Ford is still unsigned, and Shelby Harris has been released and Seattle saves some money against the cap. I can't find exactly how much, but they saved money against the cap doing that. He may return to the team, but there's talk that they explored a trade of him. And is this move like a big free agency signing, especially after that offseason where they kept their guys together and they re-signed Poona Ford, they re-signed Brian Monet, that they've really tried to keep their own in house. Is this now like an overcorrection of, well, we're going to let the whole kind of front seven walk because we'll get onto the inside linebacker situation. They've even let running backs walk. Is this an overcorrection? Because Bob Condota of the Seattle Times, he reported that the Seahawks also made a serious run at Zach Allen, who got paid incidentally by Denver for fairly similar contract figures. But they simply couldn't find a way to make it work financially to bring in both Dre'Mont Jones and Allen, and Jones was their top target. So it's kind of wild that Seattle was that aggressive at fixing the interior of the defensive line.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, is it an overreaction? Kind of to answer that, I only know how to answer that by turning into two different conversations, like run defense and pass rush. If it's pass rush, no. I mean, if you want to, you had a problem with your 4-man rush, you can only improve that really by getting the guys for it. And they definitely didn't have the guys to have a potent 4-man rush. So you need dudes for that. Um, if it's run defense, then letting all these guys go, then maybe it is a little bit of an overreaction. Now, there are questions there because as much as I appreciated Shelby Harris, you can't pay him that cap hit. You need to cut him and see if you can bring him back for like $5 million. Essentially what they gave Reed. And we'll talk about Reed. Puna Ford, I mean, he's an unrestricted free agent, right? And I don't know what his market will be. I'm sure that league wide will view him as having a down year, so that should make him cheaper. But like, we can isolate Puna Ford's performance. When they played 3-4, Puna Ford is still Puna Ford. When they didn't play 3-4, when they put him in bad situations, he was bad. But you know who was even worse in those situations? Dre'Mont Jones. So like this past year, it's just Ejiro Evero didn't play Dre'Mont Jones in those situations that I just mentioned very much. So like I don't like what I'm saying. I feel like should be obvious, and it feels asinine to say, well, does John Schneider know that? But like, how does he perceive this? Like it doesn't need to be rocket science. We can simply, like, they know their own internal numbers. They know what opponent yard per carry is when they play bear, which is 3-4. Or even tight to start the season. They were still average in it, and they switched from tight to bear, and they were even better in bear. So the whole thing is perplexing to me. I think it's more of less of a performance review and more of just a cap consideration thing. And I think that they're still going to make another move in addition to Jaron Reed. I think Jalen Carter is still in play, at least for football reasons. Again, there's a lot up in the air now. There's probably a lot of
Yeah.
stuff that we don't know. But football reasons, this doesn't preclude them because they still have, I mean, they lost 4 guys. They've only gained 2. So the fourth being Brian Monet. They cut Quinn Jefferson. Puna Ford's unrestricted free agent, currently not signed with anyone, and they obviously cut Shelby Harris. So they've lost 4. They've only gained 2. They need to find 2 more. Yeah, you could easily draft 2, but I don't know
That's
if
risky. Yeah, so here we have Draymond as the head up four technique. Again, similar to Seattle, there's only so many ways to play defense, but on the left here you have 2 tight ends. So this probably would have looked like excuse me, this probably would have looked like a bear look where this guy would have been head up, this guy Jones would have been a 3 technique, this guy would have been a 3 technique, but because of the pair tight ends, they've sort of bumped over towards it. And this head up position is where you see, rather than a 6-inch forward step, knock the crap out the guy and play as shade and stay outside of him and do not get reach blocked, win your B gap. Because you're head up, you take more of a 6-inch lateral step, and then you mirror his angle of departure and try and stay in play and play a gap and a half, or basically 2 gap. Now, if we watch Jones play this technique, and where he has difficulty is when this tight end comes and has to combo him. That's a difficult assignment, right? But this is a good play that Griff's found.
yeah. So I mean, I was critical and said you don't want him mirror stepping a lot, you don't want him 2-gapping a lot, but on one-on-ones, when he's engaged with tackles, he actually does
Yes.
really well. He wins leverage. He has the anchor for it. And he has the technique for it. He was actually way more technically proficient than I thought he'd be. I mean, look at his hand placement. He gets them, I think, actually. So like Clint Hurt, he likes the hand supinated. So his hand, like where you're more like this with thumbs up, it looks like his hands are more like he's making a 90-degree angle. Now, Clint Hurt may not like that, but point being is the hand placement's great. Look at the hip level, look at the pad level, all that. Then he's able to control the block and shed to get to the ball, right? That's what 2-gapping is all about. Play inside out. So that's a really good rep. The only problem is that when he's mirror stepping in that exact look, if that tight end down blocked on him, he gets sent flying.
Yeah,
So
and you know what? Look, the big thing there is to keep your outside pad down, but his outside pad is high when he strikes guys. He kind of exposes it a bit more than he some perhaps could avoid doing that to an extent. So um maybe that's a hand strike thing as well, because if you strike with the thumbs up again, it's keeping you lower, right? It's
right,
above your head, it's above your eyes.
right.
Whereas this is more kind of out. But yeah, this is
But
impressive because guys, here he technically has and in Seattle's system, how they've taught in the past, technically he still has this B gap, but if the ball is going to cut back, then you bounce back into the C, and that's exactly what he did here. And it's what I was saying as well. When he's one on one in the or four tech position, he's fine. It's just when that outside pad gets high and a tight end comes in, he gets knocked around a bit.
Right. So that's a good example of like down in, down out stuff, being able to hold the line, showing like the natural anchor that he has. Because really, I mean, he's not 300 pounds. He's not even, well, like a lot of those guys are more than 300 pounds. He's not even 300. He's not even 290. So I mean, those guys can lose ground, and this is an example where obviously he doesn't, and it shows that he can do that. There are a lot of guys that are 280, 285 that can't. Like, so it's good that he can. So this is same alignment, same assignment, right? He's two gapping.
Yep.
But this shows how he, even from like a an even stance that he has right now, where it's not conducive toward getting north and into the backfield,
No,
right?
it's sideways.
He can use his lateral suddenness to still get into the backfield and create something disruptive. So it's one thing to stop the offense from making a positive play, but it's another to be able to do that and still find ways to be negative. And this is him causing a negative play as well. So like even when Seattle had a good run defense in 2020, 2021, and when they played Bear in 2022, they weren't able to be penetrative in it. So like they would hold the line really well, but they wouldn't create like negative explosives, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an example of him able to do that. So even though technically Denver's not in bear right here, or they're in 3-4 personnel, but it's technically like under space in a way because the
Yep.
nose tackle's playing a 1.
Yep.
If you just imagine 98 playing a 0 technique, then boom, it's all of a sudden it's Seattle's bear with the check into a 4 because you got a tight end. So this is an example of, hey, they can actually create negative plays here. And Nwosu is another guy who can create negative plays. So now they've got two guys that can create negative plays on top of everyone else just being solid.
Mm.
As much as people want to disagree, like in this picture right here, when Seattle ran the identical front, more or less, Poona Ford, Shelby Harris did fine. They were absolutely fine, but they weren't getting into the backfield. So Jones can get into the backfield here. Now, if Poona was playing nose like he did in 2020, he absolutely was getting in the backfield. And that's what makes bringing him back exciting, because you compare him with Dre'Mont on the field at the same time.
Yep.
And then you draft Carter, then you're really cooking. But
Yeah, and this four tech play from Jones here, he does this against the pass, like play action stuff too. I think
yes,
for
yep.
me, this is the biggest thing he brings. This is why you sign him. You don't necessarily sign him for the the three tech like passing down stuff. That's an added bonus, but this kind of ability to disrupt against the run, and then the layers off that, the play fakes. That's the big deal for me because they, as you said, Griff, they haven't had that, and
Right.
it's
Because he
literally what Pete Helton spoke
understands,
about getting.
yeah, he understands blocking schemes.